Hey y'all, it's Kim.
And Casey.
And we are back with another Questions We Get Asked All the Time video. And this one we truly do get asked all of the time. And it always comes from a place of intensity. And it is, I haven't heard back from recruiters yet. Like, is something wrong with me?
Yeah. Why am I not hearing back?
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Which, understandable, especially in this year, considering how rapidly the recruiting scene is changing for our industry.
Yeah, like I will say that like before the panini,
The pandemic.
Before the panini, I would say that there was like a really reliable schedule that university recruiting like would operate on because it was so in step with the academic calendar, right? Like school always goes back in session in August and September. You guys always roll off in May and June. Like, you know, we hit the ground running in fall recruiting. And I think that there's always this sense of urgency on the employer side to like execute recruiting as quickly as possible, because if you didn't, then you would lose access to the best possible talent. And then I think that like students really caught on and started to realize, oh snap, like we need to like, for example, at the UW, like their CS career fair happened not even a week into school starting.
It's true.
Right? And so I think that students kind of, it's common knowledge that like recruiting starts in fall and you just got to get going. And so I think that when you get a little bit into the fall season and you like haven't been getting reached out to, it can cause a lot of anxiety. Because especially when you feel like other people are getting reached out to and you're like, I'm not getting reached out to, like, what does that mean? But I will say, like, in fall 2023, and honestly, ever since the panini started and then like post that, I do think recruiting timelines for all companies have just started to vary a lot more. Like, I think that there are some companies that are very on top of it and start recruiting like in late summer and finish their recruiting by Christmas time. But I would say the majority of like my peers, even now, like, you know, as we get to mid-October, end of October, still not quite sure exactly how many people they're going to hire.
Yes.
And that's going to cause delays in the overall recruiting timeline. Like, especially, you know, because if you don't know how many people you're going to hire, you don't know how many people you're going to interview, you still have to go to all of the career fairs because they're happening. Those are pre-scheduled events.
Right.
But maybe, you know, you're not able to like execute on the people that you are seeing. You're not able to push them forward.
At least not yet.
Not yet. Exactly. So I just want to say, like, I just want to kick off this video, you know, we wanted to kick off this video saying that, like, it is actually it is normal for you to hear a little bit later than you might think.
Yeah. You know, previous years, maybe we sort of thought of October as the end of the time in which invites might be sending out as for interviews, but that timeline is really elongating. And I think also what we might want to talk about next is there's a lot of categories where you might reach out to a company, but they will never reach back out to you. And that's just the name of the game. There are some situations where you are owed a response, but a lot of the stuff that you're doing during this early recruiting period of the fall, you are not, like, recruiters are not even intending to respond to you ever.
Yeah. So let's talk about the three scenarios where, like, I feel pretty strongly that, like, you are owed a response from a recruiter.
Yeah.
Okay. So, like, the first scenario is you have an offer. You've been given a verbal offer or a written offer, and you are trying to communicate with your recruiter to kind of like figure out some logistics, figure out some questions. Like, that's when like you should be getting like high touch contact from the recruiter.
Yes.
Like, we're expecting that. Now, if you are not for some reason, maybe that recruiter has like moved on to a different company and they just haven't communicated that properly, that's when it would be appropriate to kind of start trying to reach out to other contacts at the company to kind of figure out like what is going on. That is if you are in the offer stage.
Yes.
The other two scenarios are related to interviews. So when you have either finished an interview, and when I say interview, I don't mean online assessment or coding assessment. I mean like a scheduled time with an engineer or recruiter where like you have had a conversation in an interview setting. The interview word has been said. Like during that time, like after that time, you should expect a response. Typically like within anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks. Honestly, if a recruiter responds within 1 week of your interview, like that's super fast.
That's really fast.
Like,
which I know for students can feel like that's a long time period, but in corporate work, that is a pretty fast
super
turnaround.
Fast. It's usually more like 2 or 3 weeks is the expectation.
Totally.
Now, sometimes recruiters will be kind of good about being like, this is when you can expect to hear back. And like once that threshold of time has crossed, like, yes, absolutely, you can reach out and be like, yo, what's going on? But, don't do it within days, because that's absolutely going to be a no. And then the last but not least is if you have been formally invited to interview, and like, let's say you've been asked for like your availability or your schedule, and then there's a gap in communication, like that is a scenario where like you should expect and you deserve a response when you have been formally invited to interview.
And so, like Kim kind of mentioned, in all of those scenarios, a week is a pretty fast turnaround for email in general. So if you are waiting on the response from the recruiter, it is appropriate to send them a like, hey, just wanted to check in, still waiting to hear back about XYZ. And if you still don't receive a response to that, it's okay to continually say respond to that email with like a polite ping, just putting this at the top of your email, maybe like once a week.
Yeah. Like, and again, and those are for scenarios where you deserve, let's be really clear, where you deserve a response.
Now, unfortunately, or this is just how the game is played, there are a lot of scenarios in which you are going to put yourself out there and you're just never going to hear back from the company.
And it's so crappy. Like, I know, like, it's super not fun to, like, just, like, be left hanging, right? Or, like, this is, like, when we talk about, like, oh, like, the company ghosted me. Like, I never heard back. And it's just, unfortunately, like, in recruiting, like, companies have the power at this stage before they have decided to select you to move forward. Like, you are kind of stuck in this situation where you're kind of left hanging. To be explicit about these different scenarios, the first one I want to call out is online assessments, because I do hear a lot of complaints from students that, like, I did an online assessment, and that's kind of usually when you would expect to get an actual response.
It feels interviewee.
Yeah. But here's the thing about online assessments. They're actually useless. And they don't really help the company narrow. The whole point of online assessments is to narrow down like a company's number of candidates that they to choose from, right? Because like, like, let's say, even I work at like a medium-sized company. We have so far received almost 10,000 applications to our internship for 50 positions. Like, it's really hard to narrow down 10,000 to like even like 200 people that I would want to start with first round interviews. So companies sometimes will try to use online assessments, but I think what ends up happening is, students are getting so good at online assessments. Students are cheating / finding resources online about the online assessments. And at the end of the day, like, that data doesn't really help recruiters narrow down the field. And so they're left in a situation where they're like, well, we can't move forward. We don't know yet how we're going to move forward.
Right.
So
even if you pass everything and you do really well in the online assessment, it's still at such a scale. Like, those recruiters might be sending out thousands of those online assessments because it's inexpensive compared to taking time with an engineer. And just like your application, that is a scale at which you are not going to get a written or verbal rejection.
Yeah. So it goes without saying, but like at the application stage. So like, I get a lot of questions on like, where am I going to hear back about my application? And here's the thing, like with recruiting, especially when you're doing high volume recruiting, it is something that happens over months and months, usually over like almost the entire academic year. Like I'll start in July, August when the job posting is posted, and up basically until the internships are going to start like in early May. Like I will try to recruit for as much as I can until those internship positions are filled. Sometimes they get filled early, sometimes they get filled late. More often than not, they're getting filled late.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to applications, you actually don't want to give an answer until you're done recruiting.
Right.
So, in a way, like, I totally get students wanting to know, like, well, where am I at in the process? And the thing is if you get moved forward, you will be told. And until you get moved forward, you just got to assume that you're in a waiting pen.
Yeah. And that could be a variable amount of time based on the student and the company. It could be a very short time. It could be a really long time. You could never hear back. And so unfortunately, you just have to get very comfortable with, after you put out applications or online assessments, that might be the end of your interaction with that company.
Yep. You just got to YOLO it and figure it out. Same thing with, I would say, like along the lines with applications, when you talk to a company at the career fair, that's also typically like I'm putting in an application. And a lot of times, like, you will not be followed up with after the career fair unless they actually decide to move forward with you. So again, another situation where you're like kind of left hanging. And I know that doesn't feel great, right? Because you like just invested a bunch of time standing in this company's line, like pitching yourself, showing interest.
You had a
like
sparkling conversation. It felt good.
People want that answer, but like that's just, it just doesn't make sense for companies to give the definitive answer until they are for sure done recruiting.
Yes. And so I think that also, you know, we're all in the sort of like initial communications with the company. This also obviously applies as well to cold reach outs, anything on LinkedIn. You are not guaranteed a response. I know sometimes students are like, oh, well, I emailed the recruiter, and the recruiter's job is to talk to students, right? You have no idea how many emails recruiters are getting, unfortunately.
Like hundreds, thousands. Like if it's peak, and especially if you work at a very popular company, like it can be overwhelming the number of emails that you end up getting. And, you know, our basically like as far as like follow-up advice for messages and cold reach outs in this situation, like, so we had talked about how like if you are owed a response, you can wait like a week before you follow up. If you are in that category of cold reaching out via email or LinkedIn and you want to do a follow-up, like you need to wait at least 2 weeks before you like polite ping, like bringing this back up to your inbox. Cause like otherwise, I mean, again, when you're not owed a response, pushing like follow-up emails like that are fewer than 2 weeks starts to seem very entitled.
Yes,
And that's not your intention, but...
And we know it's like also, you know, timelines are different as a student. For example, like I've certainly, as a professor, you know, I have students send me follow-up emails like, hey, did you get my email like 2 or 3 days later? And I'm like, that's just not the speed at which most people in like a full-time industry will respond to something like that. So thank you for growing your patience muscles, you know, in that way. And one thing that is also just a little unfair, I'm just gonna use the word unfair, is that our expectations too is if you are requested something, like if a recruiter says, give me your scheduling, tell me something, send me your resume,
we expect an immediate response from you for sure. Like it's like we want you to like move with speed, but we are not going to extend the same courtesy the other way around, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's not fair, but we're just telling you how the game is played. And again, it's mostly a scale thing. It's just those recruiters are trying to slot you in and figure things out really quickly. And so the faster you can get your information to them, so when they have that time to address whatever they're doing, you want to make sure that there's no barriers.
And it's like also a power dynamic thing, right? Like right now at that point in time, the company is holding all the power.
That's true.
So they're expecting you to kind of like be super on top of it.
Yes, exactly. Which is why theoretically in the offer stage, that power is shifted a little bit more and they should be extra responsive to you. And you'll notice that your recruiter is wanting to get on the phone with you and things like that at the offer stage. So it can be a frustrating thing. It's not fair, but you just kind of have to get really comfortable with putting yourself out there as much as possible.
Yeah. And it's, you know, we get it. Like we get that it can be a really demoralizing thing when you're not hearing back. Like I'm not trying to be like, I'm not trying to like tell you how to feel or whatever. I think like the point of this is it's normal. It's normal to not hear back. And it really is okay if you're not hearing back. It doesn't mean that like you're not going to get a job, even if other people around you are hearing back. I mean, there's a plethora of reasons why, right? And a lot of it has to do with luck. Some of it has to do with nepotism. Like just sometimes you just, you know, you don't have they have some connections that you're not aware of or whatever. And, you know, everyone's on their own journey.
Yeah.
Like everyone's on their own journey. Now I will say that like, you know, it is important to be reflective and like think about making sure that you are putting yourself out there enough to optimize the chances of getting interviews. We have a video on the channel right now that's all about increasing interview invites. I talk about the 5 different catalysts that typically lead to an interview invite. And you want to make sure that you're like doing the bare minimum to like, you know, optimize the interview invites. But like if you kind of reflect on all those 5 categories and you're like, no, I'm doing all these things, then, you know, sometimes it's kind of how the cookie crumbles and we just gotta, we gotta be nice to ourselves.
Yeah.
We gotta be nice to our community. We just gotta exercise some patience.
And just every time you want to send a follow-up email to somebody you've already reached out to, maybe just think about continuing to cast that net wider. That's a better way to spend your time.
It's a numbers games, y'all, for reals. And
just
as
takes
Casey,
one.
I was going to say, as Casey always says, it just takes one.
Takes one.
It just takes one. I think that's it for this video, Case, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys, we know this is like a tough time in the recruiting season. Like this is the part where you really start to kind of like lose energy, feel the burnout, especially if things aren't going exactly the way you want. So, you know, like take a beat, take some rest, like focus on your classes. You guys got a lot of other responsibilities that you're doing. And like, you know, as long as you don't give up and as long as you keep going and as long as you honestly expand your reach, because I think sometimes students can get really like, it's just FANG, it's just the big tech.
Yeah. Big names only kind of thing.
But as long as you just keep putting yourself out there, like it's going to happen for you.
Yes. It might just take longer for computer science students to find an opportunity right now, but that doesn't mean that there's tons of opportunities still out there. Yeah, just maybe time to explore some other areas of industry and companies that you previously weren't paying attention to.
Yeah. Until next time, guys, I'm still Kim.
And I'm Casey.
That's still Casey. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.